Can the American people change Washington, D.C.?
In Washington today, you cannot fix Washington. Washington was created in deception, starting in 1868. The 41st Congress changed Washington to a corporate-style government and gave it an area of jurisdiction of 100 square miles, which is known as Washington, D.C., or the District of Columbia today. In 1974, some of the land was taken back from Washington, and today Washington is 68 square miles. Anyone who claims to be a citizen of the United States, under legal definition of the United States, is pledging their allegiance to Washington, D.C., or the District of Columbia. They are not Americans. You can be a U.S. citizen or you can be an American, but you can't be both. It's impossible. Anyone who claims to be a citizen of the United States, under legal definition of the United States, is pledging their allegiance to Washington, D.C., or the District of Columbia. They are not Americans. You can be a U.S. citizen or you can be an American, but you can't be both. It's impossible. The total jurisdictional authority and territory of the corporation in Washington is the District of Columbia, period. It has never been legislated any differently than that. So why is the District of Columbia ruling over the states in America? Well, they're doing it, go back to the implied consent that we talked about earlier. They are using the implied consent of the people because we are not saying no. You can throw everybody out of Washington. You can vote every single one out. You can change the president, change the entire Congress, and you cannot change Washington. It was created in deception. It has operated in deception since 1868, and nothing you do to change it. There's nothing you can do to change it. You can't change Washington. Washington is what it is. A leopard cannot change its spots. They cannot turn over a new leaf because the laws are designed for them to deceive, lie, and cheat the American people. And we can document that.
How did the American people lose the original constitutional republic?
Well, first of all, everybody thought we still had the same system of government that we always had because they did the change so slowly and gradually, and they never told the public. They never told us what was going on. The government was changed without the consent of the people, and it's very clear in the Declaration of Independence that they govern by the consent. Well, then, under our system of law, for them to alter or abolish or change anything in the Constitution, they have to go to the people. Congress can't do that. And in 1868, when this change really started, it went from 1868 through 1882, where the primary changes were done. Congress never once asked the people what they wanted, and they had no authority to move forward. We get our authority from the Declaration, the Holy Bible, and the Constitution to move forward, and that's what we have embraced. Now, about 30 years ago, a group of people, we call them patriots or sovereigns, whatever the term was at the time, began to study the law because we'd been dumbed down. We didn't know what was going on. We had no idea what had been done to the American people. But we began to study and read the law. And all of a sudden, things started showing up. It's all in there. It's all recorded, but it's hidden. But when we started doing thousands, and many people across the country started doing studies, all of a sudden, God gave the people an interest in the law. And it was part of a divine movement across this nation to wake up the people of America. All of this was orchestrated by God, folks. It was not orchestrated by us. God woke the people up, and they began to study and they begin to learn that the keys, their freedom was in the law already, and we just uncovered those keys and we brought them out and we began to use them, and we discovered that they never got our consent to do away with our republic. So everything that has been done since 1872 at the very latest, probably earlier than that, has been done without the consent of the people and therefore is unlawful. But that doesn't make it illegal. It is legal because we have given our implied consent. And implied consent works like this. If you're holding a cup of coffee and drinking a cup of coffee, and I walk up to you and I take that cup of coffee away from you and you don't say no or you don't protest, whose coffee is it? It's my coffee now. But if I try to take it away from you and you don't let me have it, you get to keep the coffee, right? That's the way implied consent works. The people did not say no. And so the government in their legal system decided that that is okay because they didn't protest. They didn't say no. Well, the people are standing up now by the thousands across America and joining with this republic and saying no. And now the legal system is in very much jeopardy because they cannot continue to operate without the consent of the people. And the people are not granting them that consent anymore. So they have no authority, and we have all the authority. Because this republic was sanctioned by Almighty God. It is recorded in history, and it has never been repealed.
Why is there a two-party system in America today?
Well, basically, the two-party system that we have today in Washington was created by the bankers. The bankers created the Democratic and Republican system of government to appear that the people really had a voice when they didn't. They created a controversy by two houses of Congress to entertain the people, basically, so that they could promote their agenda without the people realizing what they were doing. And their agenda was to steal the wealth of America. This has been going on for a long time. And the people today are in a system of slavery. The 14th Amendment did not free the slaves. It just made millions of more slaves. That's not what was promoted to the public, but that's what actually happened. And today, your personal property and the public property that we all own together as supposed to own as sovereigns has been taken and mortgaged even without our knowledge or our will or our consent, and it's not lawful to do that. In the republic, you will receive your property back. You will actually be landowners again. You will not pay property taxes. You will not have income taxes. You will not have unlawful taxes. And the cost of living will go down considerably. Industry will explode in this nation, and the people will be blessed again.
Radiation rate is 1138, retract. Radiation rate is 1138, retract.
Share that with you. The truth becomes clearer when we simply look at our current banking system. According to a report entitled The Federal Reserve Directors, a study of corporate banking influence conducted by the Committee on Banking, Currency and Housing, House of Representatives in August 1976, it was concluded that all major financial banking cartels of the United States are all subsidiaries of the London Bank of England. In other words, the Neiman Rothschild Bank owns every major bank in the United States. This list includes Lehman Brothers and Morgan Stanley, recently dissolved from the created economic crisis, National City Bank, Chase Manhattan, and many others. Every time a taxpayer pays a tax, They are transferring their labor to the Queen of England and her heirs. Who are her heirs, you may be asking? All of your presidents and high office officials who are related to the aristocracy by blood. These officials are more commonly known as esquires. An esquire is defined as a man belonging to the higher order of English gentry, ranking immediately below a knight. To represent the crown, esquires or attorneys were used to handle the legal process of infiltrating the Americas. These esquires maintained positions of power, thus continuing control through British Admiralty law. Most of us have heard of Benjamin Franklin and John Adams and their early contributions to the United States, but what you may not have heard is that Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, and John Jay were all esquires to the crown. They negotiated the Paris Peace Treaty of 1783 on behalf of the United States. It becomes clearer now why the treaty seems to align in favor of the British, even though they supposedly lost the war. The Paris Peace Treaty did not give America title to land. The king's possessions in America were protected and governed by corporate charters. Benjamin Franklin visited England and France many times during the Revolutionary War. Again, the British just moved from overt control of the 13 colonies to covert control. After the Civil War, the United States was financially weakened. Low on resources and still struggling to put the country back together, America needed money. The international bankers were right there to lend us all that we needed. In 1871, Congress cut a deal with the Rothschild bankers to incur a debt, which would allow the establishment of a new government controlled by foreign money interest. Under the Legislative Act of February 21st, 1871, the United States government incorporated as a commercial enterprise to do business for profit. What that means is that the United States of America changed from a country into a corporation. What you must understand is that this changed the entire process of how our government works and its overall objective as an enterprise. This Legislative Act of 1871 designated the District of Columbia under a separate form of government with separate jurisdiction from the rest of the Union States. With the United States of America now incorporated as a commercial enterprise, the country could borrow huge sums of money from the international bankers. The debt would eventually get so high that by 1933, just 62 years later, the United States would have to file for Chapter 11. Because of the Legislative Act of February 21st, 1871, Washington, D.C. is not a state, but a jurisdiction called the District of Columbia. The evidence for this fact can be found in the 41st Congress, Session 3, Chapter 62, 1871, when they state, "An act to provide a government for the District of Columbia, be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States and Congress assembled, that part of the territory of the United States included within the limits of the District of Columbia be, and the same is hereby created into a government by the name of the District of Columbia, by which name is hereby constituted a body corporate for municipal purposes, and may be contract and be contracted with, sue and be sued." In short, the 50 states are separate from the jurisdictional lands of the District of Columbia. This district is a corporation called the United States of America. Contrary to what you were taught in school, the United States is not a country. It is a corporation like IBM, General Motors, or Microsoft. This corporation has legal jurisdiction to do business and create franchises. Consider the other 50 states as franchises for the parent company of the United States of America. This is why we have a president and not a king or queen. Only kings or queens can rule countries. Legally, a president cannot rule over a country, but can make decisions on behalf of the king or queen. In the case of the United States, that is exactly what our president does. Countries don't have presidents. Corporations do. Whenever the president is being introduced, he or she may be referred to as the President of the United States. The United States of America is no different than General Motors of Detroit or Sears and Roebuck of Chicago. These descriptions are referring to companies which reside in a specific jurisdictional area. In Volume 20, Corpus Juris Secundum, 1785, it states, "The United States government is a foreign corporation with respect to a state. Each of the 50 states is foreign to the other. This is why you can gamble in Las Vegas, Nevada, but not in Utah. This is also the reason why persons who commit crimes in one state and flee to another are extradited back to the state where the crime was committed. This is done because under law, the state where the crime was committed is the only state that has jurisdictional authority. Under business law, every corporation must have a president, a secretary of treasury, and so on. Our president is the President of the United States of America. He is not the President of America." This concept can be somewhat confusing, especially since America and the United States is constantly being sold to the public as existing in the same jurisdictional area on the map. The only connection the 50 states have to the United States Corporation is again either by contract and or franchise agreement. A part of this franchise agreement is designated by the status of individuals who call themselves citizens. This contract between the United States of America and the 50 separate states is called an adhesion citizens contract. This adhesion citizens contract is known as the 14th Amendment, which was ratified on July 28, 1868. The second part of the franchise definition mentions that it allows an individual or group to carry out specific commercial activities. These activities fall into a category called interstate commerce. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 of the United States Constitution is known as the Commerce Clause. It states that Congress has the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations among the states and with the Indian tribes of the time. This power fell under a regulatory body called the Interstate Commerce Commission, or ICC, in 1887. Each time you sign your name or pledge an oath, you are changing your status. You may be asking, what about American citizenship? In law, when you see the words American citizen, this denotes that you are a United States citizen contracted into with the birth certificate, social security number, or through your state franchise agreement, which is the adhesion contract of the 14th Amendment. It is critical that you understand that you are not and cannot be an American. An American is a free person who has not made a contractual agreement with the United States Corporation. Remember, you are not an American. You are legally a citizen living in a foreign state. This authorization granted by the corporation called the United States of America can be tied into three main areas of contract, three of which we have mentioned.
We looked at the 14th Amendment, and we realized that this amendment was really a contract. It was an adhesion contract between the United States government and the citizenry of this country.
It's slaves.
What that meant for African Americans was this. It meant that the old days of slave ownership, where a white male owns a slave on a plantation, was done away with. And what the owners who owned those slaves did was transfer their property, which were the slaves, from the slave owner to the United States government under the 14th Amendment. And if you recall, when you study history, you'll know that many of the southern states and those slave owners were compensated for transferring their property over to the United States government. So what that means for black folks is this. is that you're not free. You are what is called emancipated. And an emancipation is not freedom. Emancipation is the transfer of property from one owner to another owner.
This process has nothing to do with sovereignty. A citizen of the United States Corporation or American cannot be sovereign because they do not own the land or have clear title to land. Further, these persons have not established a military to take the land or to create their own land within the continental United States.
We have in this past year made great progress in ending the long era of conflict and Cold War. We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be. The 14th Amendment to the Constitution, ratified in 1868 following the Civil War. As barbaric as it may sound today, the black slaves, prior to the conclusion of the Civil War, were legally considered to be property, with none of the rights or privileges of free-born people, only duties. The money interests took advantage of America's desire to free the slaves, and found a way to use the swiftly adopted post-war constitutional amendments to enslave all of the people. The deceit is in the wording of both the 13th and 14th Amendments. You will note that the 13th Amendment provides that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist within the United States. But why the emphasis on involuntary servitude? Isn't it the same thing as slavery? Sure it is. But they had to mention the concept of involuntary servitude because they wished to retain another type of slavery, voluntary servitude. Voluntary servitude is an ancient and established concept. It was the way serfs became subjects to their lords during feudal times in England and other European countries. It was a way for free men to earn a living at a time when all property was held by a select few, and thus anyone who wanted to farm and support their family had first to agree to be subject to a lord of the land. Our forefathers hated this concept and designed our Constitution to exclude titles of nobility, making all Americans sovereign. The 14th Amendment turned the intention of the founders on its ear by making voluntary servitude a requirement for former slaves to gain the rights already guaranteed to free-born United States citizens.
So in other words, they weren't going to let you out of slavery until you signed a contract that will keep you in slavery. That'll keep you owned by others instead of you owning yourself. And this is what authority is. Now, so when they come around and turn around and say they are your authorities, this is why they're saying they're your authorities. Because we are signed in under their contracts as one of their citizens, slaves, or property. We already know that the Spirit is the authority, which is God. So that's what they're saying. They're saying that they own our spirits, that they control our spirits, kind of like Satan would say, the devil himself. So they calling themselves your God, which is the writer of your law, your story. Whoever set law is God.
So the 14th Amendment ostensibly was written to provide the former slaves with the same constitutional rights of free-born American citizens, but only if they agreed first to become subject to the jurisdiction of the corporate United States. Making oneself paramountly, that is, first subject to the jurisdiction of the laws of the United States, however, limits access to parts of the Bill of Rights, as we'll explain in a moment. But first remember, anyone who voluntarily subjects himself to the laws or jurisdiction of another is, in every way, obligated to abide by the terms of any contracts or laws established by whomever establishes the rules of the contract. In simple terms, this meant that the former slaves became subjects first to the United States, and secondly to the state in which they lived. They had no sovereignty whatsoever. This status had never existed in the United States prior to that time. The 14th Amendment created a new class of citizenship in the United States, a second-class citizenship.
In other words, a class for the slaves, like the ghetto that we got right now, the projects where there's a lot of people in poverty. It's not just black people, but it's mostly black people there. You know what I mean? You know, and I say that because pretty much we're all there. You see what I'm saying? I don't, you know, they try to add these numbers up where the numbers are imbalanced to start with. But the bottom line is that they had to make another class for the slaves that they were still taking ownership over. So, in other words, them releasing us out of slavery basically meant we ain't gonna beat you and work you on the field no more exactly like that. But we still is gonna keep you as our pet. We still gonna keep you as our pet for America. You see, these people like dogs. You see what I'm saying? Not like that though. You know, I don't mind dogs either, but I'm just saying like these people like dogs, so that's how they looking at you. They're looking at you like a pet. You see what I'm saying? Of America. And they want to keep you like this.
Citizenship. Up until 1868, every American was a paramount citizen of their state, and by virtue of that, also a citizen of the United States, with full individual sovereignty as guaranteed by Amendments 9 and 10 in the Bill of Rights. But so-called naturalized citizens, or 14th Amendment citizens, are paramountly subject to all laws of the United States, and, having no status as freeborn citizens, have no access at all to the unenumerated rights retained for the people by Articles 9 and 10 of the Bill of Rights. That's because, in order to get any rights at all, they had to subject themselves to the jurisdiction of the corporate United States, which left them no unenumerated rights. The only rights they had were those specifically written into the Constitution. The sad tragedy of America today is that all U.S. citizens, regardless of race, are now 14th Amendment slaves due to contracts with the government of the United States through Social Security, birth certificates, driving licenses, citizenship statements, tax forms, and many other documents. The true paramount citizenship that all Americans deserve is that of their respective state, which is a sovereign citizenship. Such status would exempt them from federal and state income taxes, as well as property and inheritance taxes. This sovereign citizenship was the status held by our forefathers.
In other words, they will be the only ones that's really free here. They will be the only ones that's really sovereign. The only ones that's truly American. With your citizens, on the other hand, you know, you're not a sovereign citizen. You're just a citizen of the United States of America. And notice that they say United States of America. United States of America mean America own these United States and own these slaves. I mean these citizens in these states. And these states are foreign. And they are not America, but they owned by America because this is a corporation. And you are owned by America. And you are a corporation, which is a slave, a citizen doing business in one of their foreign states. No matter if it's Oklahoma or Texas, you're doing business in their foreign state as a foreigner, not an American. But American citizen, meaning someone that's owned by the corporation of America through the contract of ownership through your birth certificate. America is only Columbus, only around Washington, D.C. So all the other states are owned by whoever owns Washington, D.C. And Washington, D.C. is directly owned by whites or white supremacy or whatever you want to call it. Because they was the only ones that suffer, just like what you just heard just now. They're the only ones that suffer. And they made the regular white citizen suffering too, just based on they didn't put African American or European American on his shit. just because they didn't put European American on his. See, they put African American on ours, and they put other Asian American on other people. But on his, they put Caucasian or white American. That don't mean nothing. He's just an American. They disguised it. Now, they might got you thinking that you in a democracy, in a free country, but no. They just showed you right here by the books. They are the only ones that's American. And that even goes for the white American citizen. The white American citizen is also an American, but only through their founding fathers. So anybody else that got African American or Mexican American or Asian American, all those people, if you got anything on it that says another country, that means when they come for the birthrights, they're coming to kick your ass out. Straight up. That's why Donald Trump was trying to come for the Mexicans' birthright. See, what everybody else don't understand is that when they change something in law, that goes for anybody else too. Meaning, whoever got African American or Asian American on their name too, if they coming for birthright citizenship, that means they're going to be able to kick you out too. Straight up and down. Now, I don't know if they was able to accomplish that yet or not, but that's definitely on the books right now. That's definitely what they're shooting for, and everybody needs to know that if they accomplish that, that's going to pour off into anyone that is not directly an American. Now, who has birthright citizenship? I will tell you, only whites. Only whites got birthright citizenship here right now. I'm talking about by their law, under their law, right now. Not no African American, not no Asian American. All that says is that you're from whatever it says on there. African or Asian, what? Send that nigga back to Africa. Send that one back to Asia when all this shit go down. Watch what they do. Watch to see what they do. These people got plans, and I hope everybody's woke to this. Now remember, they said America's just around Columbus, right? So if America is only around Columbus, right, which is around Washington, D.C., and the politics is only the ones that suffer, that means that the citizens went into contract with the sovereign Washington, D.C., which is America, as a foreigner in their foreign state. So you are not operating as an American right now. You are operating as a foreigner in a foreign state. And this is probably why all of a sudden they trying to put drones on Americans and look at them as being terrorists or something. You see what I'm saying? Because they already got you as not being an American, but yet a foreigner in a foreign state. And they signed themselves up as first-class Americans and signed us up as African Americans. So it don't help for us to be African Americans because that even make us even more foreigner that we got the African tag on there. You see what I'm saying? So that was just, a word game and a paperwork trick, you know what I mean, to make sure we are in hopes that we would never own none of this land. And that's why they make you pay tax on the land, because America is not for sale. So you can think that you're buying a house all you want to. No, you're going to be paying tax on that house 100 years after you being paid that house off. So they can still have an opportunity to take it back from you because the land is not for sale. Only the sovereign can own this land. You see what I'm saying? And that's the government of this land, and the government of this land is owned by other world leaders, is owned by other governments. See, because this is a corporation, meaning other countries got a sharehold in on this. So Israel own a share of it, Britain own a share of it, you know what I mean? China owns a share of it. I'm sure Russia got a share of it. You know what I mean? Business-wise, financial-wise, all of them got a share of it because this is a debt game and a slave game. You know what I mean? And an ownership game. And it's worldwide.
Shortly after this measure was taken, an internal document circulated between private British and American banking interests stated, "Slavery is but the owning of labor, and carries with it the care of laborers, while the European plan is that capital shall control labor by controlling wages. This can be done by by controlling the money. It will not do to allow the greenback, as we cannot control that. The fractional reserve policy perpetrated by the Federal Reserve, which has spread in practice to the great majority of banks in the world, is, in fact, a system of modern slavery. Think about it. Money is created out of debt. And what do people do when they are in debt? They submit to employment to pay it off. But if money can only be created out of loans, how can society ever be debt-free? It can't. And that's the point. And it is the fear of losing assets coupled with the struggle to keep up with the perpetual debt and inflation inherent in the system, compounded by the inescapable scarcity within the money supply itself, created by the interest that can never be repaid, that keeps the wage slave in line, running on the hamster wheel with millions of others, in effect powering an empire that truly benefits only the elite at the top of the pyramid. For, at the end of the day, who are you really working for? The banks. Money is created in a bank and invariably ends up in a bank. They are the true masters, along with the corporations and governments they support. Physical slavery requires people to be housed and fed. Economic slavery requires people to feed and house themselves.
The Barron's Dictionary of Banking Terms defines a certificate as a paper establishing an ownership claim. So right there, we notice that everyone with a birth certificate is defined as being owned. People are used as collateral with other nations because the U.S. is bankrupt. The United States declared bankruptcy on March 9th of 1933. At this point, the U.S. began taking out loans from a private, non-government affiliated corporation called the Federal Reserve. With no money to pay back the loans, the United States began using the citizens as collateral. All birth and marriage certificates are literally warehouse receipts. Just look at the similarities of warehouse receipts and birth certificates. Both document the date of issue, a serial number, registration number or receipt number, a description of the product, and an authorized informant to notify the appropriate government agency. With all of this information being readily available, the majority of people are unaware of their involvement with maritime admiralty law. This is possible through the manipulation of language. This admiralty law changed the meaning of the word person from a natural living person to a corporation. Driver's licenses, vehicle registrations, auto insurance forms, building permits, gun permits, work permits, tax filing documents, birth and death certificates, traffic citations, and many other forms of documentation that were once believed to be absolutely necessary only applied to persons or corporations. Upon signing such a legal document, you are indirectly waiving your rights under the Constitution and lowering your status to that of a corporation that is created with the same exact name as you. The only way to reconcile your true name from the name of the corporation is to take notice that the corporation has its name in all capital letters. This is known as capitis diminutia maxima.
There are two kinds of law on the earth, as I've said. One is called civil law, which is the law of the land, and one is called maritime admiralty, which is called the law of water. Maritime admiralty is banking law, and the law on the maritime admiralty says that you, because you came out of your mother's water, are a maritime admiralty product. This is why the ship is sitting in its berth and is tied to the dock, and the captain has to give a certificate of manifest to the port authorities because money is changing hands. This is why when you were born, you have to have a birth certificate. You are a maritime admiralty product. And therefore your birth certificate is signed by your mother. And where your mother signed on the birth certificate, get it, you will see it does not say parent or mother, it says informant. Your mother was informing the bank that she has just produced another product to be bought and sold. England, the British Crown, through international banking, owns your physical body. And that's the law. And if you could get your original birth certificate back, you would find that on the back of the birth certificate are all the banks around the world. All over the world, banks have used your birth certificate because you are a stock in a maritime admiralty banking scheme where you make money for banks. Consequently, the corporation and government and people who want to control you, they create a second you, and that second you that they control, that they created, is all capital letters. Check it out. Anytime you get a bill, get a lawsuit, you get a fine, ticket, somebody sends you a bill from the Department of Water and Power, check it out on your driver's license, on your Social Security card, on your insurance card, anything, period, anything having to do with business, your name will always be all capital letters, because only all capital letters can be dealt with by banks and government. Anytime you have a name up there lowercase, that applies to you. I got no control of you. You sign a contract in which your name is in all capital letters, now I can take it to court.
You don't think that what the national debt is
the national debt measures the wealth.
The national debt, we have
The wealthier we are.
the larger the
The national debt, it's an indication of the wealth of the country. You're right.
So the more you owe, the more you're worth.
I'll say it slowly, okay? That here.
Can you explain to consumers that?
No, look, Jen, come on, get real. Jen, get real. I can't explain. If you shut up, Jen, I think this is going to win. Someday, when you shut up and you want to talk about something, let's talk about it. Thank you. No, stop. We're done. Get out of here.
Let's just change the subject. We don't want to out something.
Listen, you get the fuck out of here. I'm through.